Our topic for this morning is the Adventist Health Study, and some of you have been involved with possibly part 2 of the Adventist Health Study, which is an extensive questionnaire about your lifestyle and that type of thing. But the reason I want to present this is because I want to show you what we're finding out about Adventists and their lifestyle, and also what they're doing and how they're confirming 140 years of health message in our church. I seem to be a little bit loud. Am I loud to you? You're comfortable. Good. Then I'm comfortable. Okay. Just for some data, comes from Issues in Science and Technology. More than 95%, well, we're not at $500 billion anymore, of our $1 trillion budget for taking care of America's health, 95% of it is spent on treatment rather than prevention. So we spend about 5% of our total health care budget on prevention and 95% on after you have the problem, which is most time too late. So you can see we're spending 95% of our budget on something when it's too late. So from that standpoint, we look back and say, okay, true prevention doesn't get a lot of rewards. Because if you never get sick, most people think that's just great. But if you get cancer, people think that's absolutely terrible. But the people that don't get sick, I think, deserve a lot more credit, because they go, well, I just go along, everything is fine. Well, I'm great. But most time we don't sit down and are grateful because I made it through the whole winter without being ill at all. Or I haven't spent one single dollar at the medical office this whole year. See, that should be actually praised and commented. But no, you don't hear about that. You hear about all the incredible things we're doing. Yes, Gail?
Isn't that what insurance is all about?
No.
They won't give you any benefits for being healthy, but the insurance
That
is
is-
all about.
That is very true. And people call me up and say, will you accept this insurance? I'm going, they won't accept me. I'll be glad to take their money if they want to pay me, but they talk about prevention. They even will send you a little pamphlet on prevention, but they don't back up their mouth by financing hardly anything. So you're absolutely correct. By the way, insurance has totally shifted from accident, like you have a car accident. You don't get paid insurance if your car is running okay. You go to the insurance adjuster when you mess up the front end and dent a fender. That's that's insurance. We just have what we call prepaid medical plans now. We don't have insurance. Insurance is not, take that out of your logic and throw it away, because we're not dealing with insurance now. That's why everything is so expensive, because what you're doing is you're just prepaying medical plans. That's really what you're doing now. And medicine is not in the business of helping you prevent disease. They're in the business of maintaining, monitoring, and dealing with a process of monitoring you. They don't expect you to get better. If you get better, you don't need them. If you get better, you don't need drugs. If you get better, they're out of business. So that's why I tell, a good doctor should always be trying to put himself out of business. If that is not your goal, then you don't have the right goal of medicine. My goal is to put myself out of business. Unfortunately, since I graduated from school, I've gotten further behind. So either people aren't listening, or we're dealing with a whole different concept that what I'm talking about here is a lot harder than going and taking a pill, which obviously it is. The question and the reason we used Adventist Health Study was, can we observe measurable health benefits in a people, Seventh-day Adventist, who have been practicing for more than 140 years, current recommendations of the health-related organizations. Now, if the health-related organizations had all the recommendations we did, they'd be a lot better off, so we'll give them credit for some of them. But Adventist literature, how do we come to this conclusion? Stuff that you've read and maybe have brought you to the same conclusion. Animals are becoming more and more diseased. When was this written? And in 1902, you'd think everything was pretty pristine and doing well, and animals had grass to eat, and they didn't get stuck in the barn 24 hours a day. And Animals are becoming more and more diseased, and it will not be long until animal food will be discarded by many besides Seventh-day Adventists. What's happened now?
And a lot of Adventists are going back to me. Well,
We have actually started out with a whole health food industry to help Adventists transfer from a meat-based diet to a plant-based diet. Many Adventists have gotten stuck on the bridge, and they've made whole industries out of it called Loma Linda Foods, or Worthington, I'm not too far away from. The point I'm getting at is that now we have a whole transition to where Adventists are a small minority of the vegetarians in this country. Someone else is listening loud and clear, and unfortunately, the hospital that I'm closest to, when they were considering serving meat at the hospital, and this came up repeatedly, and I kind of made a vow to myself, if they start serving meat here, then my work is done here. So I was the person that was picked to come in and lecture the medical staff on why they shouldn't serve meat at the hospital. So they brought me in. I stayed with the topic. I didn't go off base. I shared about meat. That's what I didn't share about milk. I didn't share about eggs. I didn't share about other dairy products. I stayed with my topic. And when I got done, one of the non-Adventist physicians raised his hands and says, well, what about milk, eggs, and cheese? So I had a little bit of opening there for a while. That medical board that night voted, or in that time frame, voted not to serve meat in the hospital. Unfortunately, the administration went against their whole medical staff, Adventist and non-Adventist, and started serving meat. And so obviously that was my writing on the wall that said I will do something else. But at least I had the privilege to give the lecture, and it was well received because the logic is impeccable. You can't do open bypass surgery on a guy's heart and serve him a hamburger the next meal. The folks were not thinking clearly here. Yes, ma'am.
Back in the 70s, I got a pamphlet that was distributed by the U.S. government
Mm-hmm.
that said diseases in food animals. And there were graphic pictures of tumors in all the different animals.
Mm-hmm.
And in the 70s was when they were first starting with the cancers and
Mhm.
stuff. But it said in the article that the tumors were just removed, but the rest of the animal parts were sent through.
Oh, well, of course, you won't want to waste the whole animal.
Exactly. And so over time, when you think about the fact that when people get tumors, it's throughout the whole body,
Mm-hmm.
then I think people are saying, but this was back in the 50s that they came out with the literature.
Yeah, they were only about 70 years behind. 1902,
Right.
the Lord will teach many in all parts of the world. So we've lost excuse. We say some parts of the world just cannot sustain without meat. It says the Lord will teach many in all parts of the world to combine fruits, grains, and vegetables into foods that will sustain and will not bring disease. Testimonies, Volume 7. Seventh-day Adventists are handling momentous truths. More than 40 years ago, 1869, the Lord gave us special light on health reform, actually gave it before that, and how we are to walk in that light. On the subject of temperance, we should be in advance of all people. 1882, in this age of the world, the use of tobacco is almost universal. Women and children suffer from having to breathe the atmosphere that has been polluted by pipe, the cigar, or the tobacco user. Those who live in this atmosphere will always be ailing. The liability to take disease is increased tenfold by meat eating. 1868. How can you read a statement like that and then read the statement in 1902 that should be totally the statement like that should say, well, if it increases disease tenfold, then why should I be eating it now? But I'm saying, remember, when did Battle Creek start? 1866. It's incredible that such a small church that began in 1863 had a full-fledged sanitarium in 3 years. You can tell what their priority was. You can tell what their mission was, and they believed that you can get to people more effectively through their health and helping them in their need than any other way of evangelism, or another very effective way is evangelism. And then you read the quotes. The health message is the right arm that opens doors. The health message breaks down prejudice. The health message, quote, is not the gospel, but it's the door that opens the way to the entrance of the gospel. 1890, Christian Temperance and Bible Hygiene. Christian Temperance was written by Ellen White, Bible Hygiene by James White. This is one book that was written together. You might want to get a copy of that. It's incredible. Health is a treasure. Of all temporal possessions, it's the most precious. Wealth, learning, honor are dearly purchased at the loss of the vigor of health. None of these can secure happiness if health is lacking. You lose your health to get your wealth, and then you spend your wealth to try to regain your health. It's a bad cycle, folks. Adventist literature, 1870. Fruits, grains, and vegetables prepared in a simple way, free from spice and grease of all kinds, make the most healthful diet. It's a mistake to suppose that muscular strength depends on the use of animal food. The needs of the system can be better supplied and more vigorous health can be enjoyed without their use. 1905. Tell that to the football players in 1905. They wouldn't figure that out until the 60s and 70s. And they went from the biggest steak to the biggest plate of pasta they could get because they realized that steak didn't make them strong out there. Steak made them lose their endurance out there on the field. 1905 again. Education in health principles was never more needed than now. Many transgress the laws of health through ignorance, and they need instruction. But the greater number know better than they do. They need to be impressed with the importance of making their knowledge a guide for life. By the way, this whole presentation I'm showing to you was made by one of the people who worked on the Adventist Health Study. And they realized their roots, their basis for the Adventist Health Study just wasn't someone's imagination. The Adventist Health Study, the reason it was undertaken was to demonstrate the validity in a scientific realm what we already know and what people get as a result of following the principles. Why do we use Seventh-day Adventists? Seventh-day Adventists will continue to be a unique population for epidemiological study. Epidemiology, the study of causation of disease. They are interested in health, hence a cost-effective postal contacts are likely to produce good results. A population like the Adventists that are interested in their own health and other people's health, they can use mailing to get good, accurate information. Not every population works it, because what do we do with most of our mail? Circular file. There are few subgroups in society that have the same range of exposures, such as diet. These should increase statistical power in testing hypothesis. So we are going to look at a few subgroups in society that have the same range of exposure. That's why we look at Mormons and compare them to Adventists. The biggest difference is Mormons eat a lot more red meat than Adventists do. But as far as smoking and alcohol, we have similar studies. Number 3, the reason that Adventists are a good study is relative absence of cigarette smoking and alcohol consumption. Allow examination of the effects of exposures of other things like diet without potentially confounding tobacco and alcohol. You see what we're trying to do here? We're trying to prove that diet does play a role, and when we can separate that out, and we've got a population that doesn't smoke and lives same moral basis or similar moral basis as far as sexual contact, then we have a better group to study. The other thing is our church structure, because of those letters of transfer, facilitates a tracking of people. You may not want to be tracked down, and it may not be a good thing, but our church system follows people throughout their whole life. That is a very good way to find out a few things. Number 1, are they still alive? Number 2, where and when did they live in certain locations? And so that's why they used Adventists for a study. And by the way, the National Institute of Health is the thing that funds the Adventist Health Study. We don't fund that from the conference. We don't fund it from the General Conference. It is funded by our government. And they want to know, if you change your life, will it make a difference? So this is some of your tax dollars at good work. Marked tendency towards vegetarianism makes this population probably the closest of any group to the lifestyle recommendations of several official bodies. Well, I propose that we're ahead of the American Cancer Society, the American Heart Association, and also the American Dietetic Association, especially those that have chosen vegan, seeking to prevent cancers and cardiovascular disease. 5 basic studies. Most of the time, number 2 and number 3 is what we refer to as the Adventist Health Study. But we had an Adventist mortality study that started all this back in 1958. Over 60 years ago, we started finding this out. It ran to 1985. It was overlapped by the Adventist Health Study 1, which went from 74 to 2006. This is the one that you may have been part of. This was California Adventist here and here. This was across the United States and some other populations. 2002 to still ongoing. And most of what you're hearing now is going to be data from number 3 here. This is obviously California. Adventist Health Study on smog. So we both live in the same town, we breathe the same air. Does my lifestyle make any difference to the smog that we're all stuck with? Because so many people are blaming smog for their lung problem, but maybe it's their smoking. Many people are blaming smog for a cancer when really it may be their hamburger. So when you have populations living in the same area, we can tell what the effects of smog are more accurately. And of course, the last one has great interest for me, Adventist Health and Religion Study. They finally got down to the basis that I want them to deal with. Because I go to the research, and they say Adventists live 10 years longer. I said, that's nice. They say, well, they do this lifestyle and that lifestyle. And I say, what about God? What about a person's belief in God, and how does that affect their immune system? How does that affect their health? So I'm going to be looking to see how they come out with number 5 here. What's that?
How do they choose who gets to be a part of it?
Well, they will be studying Adventist across the board. There's no quick test to figure out if you're converted or not.
Well, I understand that.
So they'll be studying Adventists as a group. So whenever you study Adventists as a group, you will have a whole continuum or a dilution of the effect. But they're still going to say, is it an effect over this group over here? So even if they get any benefit, I'll realize there is more benefit depending, They don't have, I'd like to see the questionnaire, It might be titled Righteousness by Faith, and we'll see how you score on that one. So you realize that anytime you put a scientific model to a spiritual component, it's got its limitations. Because we're looking for repeatable results.
Who chooses who fills out the questionnaire?
What's that?
Who chooses where to send the questionnaire to which people? I've never seen any of that.
Okay, the same way they chose, well, everyone here in this room should have had the option to be in Health Study 2. Excuse me. Then you were not at the right place at the right time. How shall I say that? We had multiple opportunities, and the way they marketed it was through the churches. Well, then I should have brought a few with me. It was a 52, I think it was a 52. How is it right here? It says on here somewhere, Adventist mortality study, we got that one. Let me go on. Let me get off red here. The Adventist mortality study, the first one they started out with was a 4-page questionnaire. You could do that in a few minutes, okay, hopefully. The Adventist Health Study 1 was a 20-page questionnaire And that N represents the number of people that got involved with that, 34,000. The Adventist Health Study 2 questionnaire, that's the one we're talking about right now, was a 52-page questionnaire of asking you everything from number of hairs on your head almost. That was one incredible, but went through extensive dietary history, extensive lifestyle history, extensive, how many times you've been married, how many children have you, all that.
Can you still participate? Is it just they've got the people on
It's 97,000 people. That's a
It's-
small amount compared to.
Excuse me.
It's like letting you know.
Oh, my voice has got to hold up today. The extensive questionnaire was done on that population, and now that population is being followed. I don't think we can join that population study at this point, if that's what you're asking me. As far as time frame, the first Adventist study back in 1958 goes on, Adventist Health Study 1, Adventist Health Study 2, the smog study, and the religious study was overlapping. I'm sorry. I wasn't sure if I was supposed to be singing this morning. I was thinking about saving my voice, but it's hard not to sing. Okay, let's go on. The concept of blue zones and this guy standing on his head here, we're looking at what causes people to live longer. Most time it is physical. We're not dealing with the religious end of it. So you will see books like this. It's Gary Fraser. Dr. Fraser was one of the people, thank you very much. Hopefully this is going to take care of my throat. Dr. Fraser was one of the research people dealing with the Adventist Health Study. He was also the man that I had to defend my dissertation against too when I was getting out of Loma Linda. And we had a little bit of an interesting discussion. But they'd let me go, and they did allow me to graduate, so I guess we were okay. And then, of course, here's National Geographic looking at blue zones around the world. Your most common ones are going to be Sardinia, Okinawa, Costa Rica, and Loma Linda, places where people are known on a regular basis to live over age 100. Now, as far as a population, when we say you live 10 extra years, that's not the ones that live to 100. They're way over that. The 10 extra years comes from looking at the standard California population and the Adventist population. By country, if we look at Australia, Canada, Germany, Hungary, Japan, Sweden, United Kingdom, United States, you'll see percentage of males surviving to age 65. How many of the males in that population make it to age 65? Well, 74%, 75%, 60% in Hungary, 80% in Japan, United States 72%, California Adventist 86.7%, the highest of all those countries, and California vegetarians, not vegans, vegetarians almost make it to 90%. So the percentage of males, Adventist, almost 90% of all Adventist males make it to 65. By the time you get to 85, you go through the whole list, and the list says, well, in Canada, 19% make it to 85. Hungary, 8%. Japan, 23%. California Adventist, 41%. California vegetarians, 48.6%. Now, look at the ladies. They outlive us. At age 65, look at this country, from 74 to 86, over a 12-year difference. Canada, Germany, Hungary, Japan, almost 90. And you come down here to California Adventist, 89.3. Japan is 89.5. Got to do better. California vegetarian is 94.1. Okay. Alive at 85, you come down the whole list. Let's look at Japan again. 41% California Adventists, 60%, a 20% change. That doesn't happen by chance. Those people are doing something that's incredible. An extra 10 years of life, Adventist Health Study 1 demonstrated that 5 simple habits Adventists promote over 100 years extend their life as much as 10 years. Regular exercise, eating a plant-based diet, eating small amounts of nuts regularly. Nuts are a healthy food. Maintain normal body weight, and not smoking. Those are the 5 habits that they have found that gives this group that we're talking about extra years of life. Individual risk factors and life expectancy, if you try to break them out and see which one gives you the most benefit, well, vegetarianism gives you 2.38 years for men and 1.6 for women. So if you're going to be a vegetarian, please be so if you're a man. Vigorous exercise, the ladies have an advantage. Exercise is more important for the ladies. Nut consumption, look at what the man gets by eating nuts, and the ladies don't get quite the same benefit. In the end, we know which group lives longer, though, don't we? Avoiding a high body mass index, in other words, maintaining your normal weight. 1.5 years, 1.9 years. Never smoking, you get 1.3 years of benefit. So that's how it breaks out for your 10 extra years. The point is, you can go back and forth between these, but the bottom line is, women live longer. They have a better life expectancy than we men do. Health habits and life expectancy among Adventists, the best lifestyle, meaning those 5 things we just talked about, those that follow those, the men 87 years old and women 88.5. Notice the discrepancy here is 1.5 years. You look at any population around the world between men and women and you always find a wider discrepancy. Converse lifestyle, those who don't follow those 5 things, whether it be eating nuts, body mass index, smoking, exercise regularly, etc., vegetarianism, the difference is 10.8 years for men, 8.7 years for females. Life expectancy at age 30, some of this might be a little monotonous. We're going to go through it. You'll get the impact of the whole study. Californians, expected life expectancy at 30. So you're already age 30. How long are you going to live? So at age 30, the average California lives another 43 years. So you add 30 and 43, almost 44 together here, and you wind up with a population at 73, almost 74 years of age. Ladies in California live 49, almost 50 years. So I'd put them almost in the 80 category. California Adventists live 51 years past age 30, and males, and ladies almost 54 years. California Vegetarian Adventists live 53 years and 55 years. Therefore, you come up with California Adventists, another 7.3, or Vegetarian Adventists, 9.4 years of longevity. Different types of vegetarians. By the way, you're going to get all kinds of definitions. I eat at the restaurant very rarely, but when you order something, what do you have vegetarian on your menu? And they'll start telling you about fish. I go, no, that doesn't work, okay? They have a mother and they can look at me. They got eyes, they got a face. Lacto-ovo, lacto, milk, ovo, eggs. You can have high lacto or even low lacto in that group. You can have the pesco, they eat fish. You can have high and low processed food vegetarians. You know what? You can eat a vegan diet that is absolutely horrible. Or you can eat a vegan diet that is very healthful. So in every realm, these labels are going to break down to some extent. And high and low, they're being kind here, high and low processed food vegetarians. They didn't use the word junk food, they're being polite. Soy and non-soy vegetarians, how do you like that group? By the way, the soy vegetarians win that score real quick. And then you got the vegans and the fruitarians. There's very few fruitarians. In all my career so far, I've never met one long-term fruitarian. I've met some people, but then their definition of fruit gets very broad. It's incredible. It's like raw food people. Their definition of raw foods gets incredibly broad, all the way through to dehydration, all the way through to, I mean, it keeps getting wider and wider. I go, well, I understand. I like good food too. You don't have to tell me. But if it makes you feel better that you're eating raw food, then it's probably doing you as much good up here as it is on your plate, and that's cool. Why argue with a person who says, I'm gluten-free? Gluten is a good protein. But if you want to be gluten-free, please enjoy it. Very few people have a gluten intolerance. A lot more have a gluten allergy. I will agree to all that. But we have millions of people going gluten-free, and they tell me how much better they feel. Why should I mess up their party? Because they've given up their donuts, they've given up their bread, they've given up their pastries, they've given up their cookies, and all that. They go, I feel great. I go, you would have felt great if you just gave them up without talking about gluten. That's the point. So we're into a gluten phase. And if my practice lasts long enough, I'll probably see a few more phases. But the point is, a relatively select group should not have any gluten at all because they don't have the enzymes. We call that celiac sprue. There's a whole other group that can have an allergy to wheat products. And there's the other group who basically do a lot better not eating their junk food and not stumping at Dunkin' Donuts on their way to work. I don't think I need to go through this except the vegan. When they say beef, none, poultry and fish, none, dairy, obviously we know what vegan stands for. Introduction to epidemiology. This is going to be pertinent to all lectures. So I want to make sure that this word that I throw around a lot called relative risk or risk ratio is understood. When we look at risk ratio, we take one group that is not exposed to meat, for example. We're going to call these vegetarians. We look at another group who eats meat. The meat-eating group gets 5 times the amount of bowel cancer that this group. What that says, though, is that both groups get bowel cancer. The vegetarian gets bowel cancer. It's just 1/5 the amount that this group over here has. So therefore, the part you're studying, meat, wouldn't be the only cause of bowel cancer, obviously. So when you use relative risk or risk ratios, we are talking about, we start with a comparison here, and we add to that. So if this group of 100 people got 3 cases of bowel cancer, this group of 100 people over here would have to get 15 cases of bowel cancer to be 5 times as much. So keep that in mind when we talk about relative risk. The next one, statistical significance. The whole field of statistics is to try to demonstrate that it is statistically significant. In other words, it didn't happen by chance. The effect that I'm telling you about wasn't just by chance. This is a cause and effect relationship. You do this, you get this. This is what validates science. Because science uses this tool, or should use that tool, to find the truth. And I will admit now, science has metamorphosized to the point where you can almost prove anything, even a good bold lie, in the name of science now. That's why you'll read things in the Spirit of Prophecy that says all true science agrees with the Word of God. There is no conflict between being a religious believer in the Bible and true science. Many people tell you that your religion doesn't allow you to think clearly enough to understand science and you're so biased. Well, I happen to see it the other way. I happen to believe that you get your eyes blinded when you don't use the Word of God as your basis to understand science. And so we see a lot of intelligent, high-level PhDs that are extremely ignorant because they're ignoring their basis for the universe around them. There is a creator, folks. If you want to ignore that, you will come to a lot of wrong conclusions in your life. And we see that. Just remember their frame of reference. If you didn't believe in a creator, how would you explain where you came from? And you go, well, that's why I have a creator, because I can't buy it the other way it went. Relative risk, the incidence of a disease, those exposed, to the incidence of disease, those are not exposed. Meat eaters versus vegetarians, high or low. Now here's how you read it. A relative risk of less than 1 would mean that this group, vegetarians, this group, meat eaters, that the meat eating group has less disease. Therefore, you conclude eating meat is important for health. Now, let's turn it around. Let's say the vegetarians had a relative risk of 1, and you come over here to the meat eating group, and their relative risk is 5. So something they're doing is increasing their disease. So if the relative risk is less than 1, whatever you're doing is helping. If the relative risk is more than 1 in that group, you got the problem. So relative risk equal to 1, exposure is unrelated. Relative risk greater than 1, you're dealing with an increased risk. This will come clear when we get an example. I'm not going to take a lot of time. P-values are just ways of determining the probability of something happening by chance, which we don't want to just say, well, it could have happened this way, and we do the study again, and it came different results, and do a third study and different results. So, let's look at percentage dying from named causes on the average ages in those fatal events. California non-Adventist versus California Adventist. So all Californians in general, all Adventists. 2 things I want you to look at. Adventists do die of heart disease. But let's look at the numbers. Diseases of the heart, percentage of Californians, 39%. The length of life is 75 years. All Adventists in California, 40%, and their years are 82. Now you come down there to the bottom. Is this just by chance? This is just a special group of people? What's going on here? The strongest evidence is that a p-value of less than 0.05 is what we call very unlikely that it had happened by chance. When you get to a p-value of 0.01, it's way on out there. This almost could not. And by the time you get to a p-value of 0.001, basically the likelihood of this happening by chance is so remote that we don't believe. We believe got cause and effect here. So the disease of the heart, living an extra 7+ years in the Adventist group, isn't by chance. There is something that caused this to happen. Of course, that's what we're doing. Neoplasms, cancer in general, you see they live longer, live longer, live longer. But I want to point out one more thing. Why is the disease of the heart a higher percentage here than in this group? I propose this. If you live an extra 10 years before you have the problem, then we're doing something right. Are we in a perfect world? No. But I still would like another good point. She's saying that we don't have, what do I like? That's a good statistic. When did you enter the Adventist health system? At what age did you enter? And what was your lifestyle prior to that? See, we open the door and say, everybody come in. So we know we get a dilution effect there. And you go through the whole thing, whether you're dealing with diabetes, whether you're dealing with pneumonia, etc., etc. So the question is, do Adventists living in California get diabetes? The answer is yes. Now let's go and show you the effects of what we're seeing here in the study. Meat intake and risk for different cancers. Therefore, if you never eat meat, your risk of colon cancer, they set equal to 1. This is relative risk. So I got a group over here, never eats meat. How many cases of colon cancer? The person who eats meats less than once a week, their risk went up to 1.5 times. 1+ times a week, their risk went almost to 2. Let's look at prostate cancer. Relative risk of 1 in that group that never eats meat. Every single column, whether it's postmenopausal, premenopausal, no matter what category you're talking about, meat consumption is always higher than the relative risk. So what I would say from this slide is that meat has something in it that increases your risk of cancer. Because the group over here that doesn't eat it has a much lower risk than the group here. So meat seems to be the component that causes that. Total meat intake and risk of colon cancer, we're just spreading it out. You're seeing some numbers here. Never, 1.5, 1.85, continues to go up. If we had people that ate meat daily, it would continue to go up. Now, what does that tell you, though? These are all Adventists. I changed. Let me go back here. This is all Adventists in this category here, and this is their cancers. Now when we're looking at the effect of meat, this should be within the Adventist population. Half of the people in the Adventist Health Study eat meat, and half don't. Now on the East Coast where I am now, North Carolina, about 70% of people eat meat, and 30% of Adventists don't eat meat. So from California to North Carolina, I found that a lot larger population eat meat. Kind of was shocking, but then they say, well, California are a bunch of nuts. Well, at least they eat more nuts, and maybe they're healthier for it. I don't know. The point is that I live in a sicker population now than what I did in Southern California from a dietary standpoint. Now, red meat, they're starting to break it out here. Yes, ma'am.
Does it have anything to do with the climate? That the people are alcohol?
No, it's preference. Californians are a unique group of people. They are more exposure, they like to be outside, they do more things. What keeps their economy going is they all spend all their money. They're not a saving people. I go, what makes this place work out here? And what I found out is that if they made $1,000 this week, they spent $999 in the weekend. And the faster you turn your money over, it's, quote, good for business if everybody keeps spending a lot. So I saw that factor. The other factor I saw is they have an incredible abundance of fresh food that is very reasonable. I could live very well, my wife and I could live very well out there for $15 or $20 a week on food. I mean, when you get grapes, when you get 3-4 pounds for $1, I can remember buying cantaloupes, 12 cantaloupes, a dozen of cantaloupes for $3, and then they threw an extra one in to make it a baker's dozen before I left the place. Ripe, ready to go. Strawberries that you folks think that California makes cardboard strawberries, I'm sorry, by the time they get to you, they probably all get, but when you get them right out of the field, they're that huge, that beautiful, and they're red to the core, and you have a treat. So a vegetarian in Southern California has got an abundance. I mean, avocados literally can grow wild there. We hike in the mountains and there's wild olive trees. So the point I'm getting at is that they have much, if you're broke in Southern California, buying a bag of rice and a bag of beans and the fruit that people almost tell you to come and pick it off their yard because it's going to fall on the ground, you can do very well. So I think that in general, they have a healthier diet because of the climate, not because the brain, not because they don't drink as much and all that stuff. So I don't know if that helps in the explanation. But here we are, we're looking at red meat and the risk of colon cancer among those who eat white meat less than once per week. So we're looking at red meat intake, and they eat white meat less than once a week. So we got a group here who did their dominant meat intake is red meat. The people who never eat meat, their relative risk is 1 in that group. Now we look in the group that eats red meat on a regular basis, and we find their relative risk for colon cancer is higher than the group who was just classified which kind of meat. Now let's go to the next slide, and let's look at white meat. Why do we show you this? Everybody believes that red meat is bad and white meat is good, even healthy. Look at the data. Never, we figured that one out. Less than once a week, 1 plus a week, 3.29 versus 1.9. Tell me which meat is better for you when it comes to your colon. Well, obviously 0. But they're making a claim that red meat is terrible for you and white meat is good. Sometimes that claim comes as a result of dealing with heart disease, not dealing with the whole picture. The other white meat, huh? The point I'm getting at here is we do this to try to shed proper light on proper problems.
But these are Adventists, so they want to eat pork.
No. No, the other white meat was a lie that kind of fell out of the producer's mouth. I don't think anybody bought that one, except the people who wanted to eat pork and they were going to eat it anyway. So, but this is why we like to look at the data. What's that? Chicken and fish would be your considered your white meat category. So we have just demonstrated that white meat over those who eat red meat less, in other words, the dominant white meat group had almost twice the amount of bowel cancer that the dominant red meat group had. Meat consumption and cancer, meat frequency, never, less than a week, more than once a week, and the statistical values. What they're showing here, obviously, is that in the whole group, the more you eat, obviously the greater the risk. Soy milk. See, this is what the Adventist Health Study does. It takes apart the situation because we can analyze, because on the questionnaire, it'll ask not only what kind of meat you eat, how frequently you eat it. And so we have the person, we know if they're still alive, we know what the disease they got, we know their whole reporting. That's why this is valuable. Soy foods reduces cholesterol, isoflavone, phytoestrogens, genistein, diazine, equal, may affect risk of cancer of the heart, osteoporosis, other disorders. American Adventists consume a greater deal of soy as non-meat complete protein. Relative risk of prostate cancer by intake of soy. Now think of it this way. Here's relative risk going in the other direction. Everything I'm showing you so far, I have a relative risk of a person who doesn't eat meat, and I show you how bad it gets when you eat meat. Now look at soy. People who never eat soy, we said your relative risk is 1. People who eat soy daily, their relative risk went down to prostate cancer. So there must be something in soy that decreases prostate cancer. If we look at once a day, then it goes down. If we look at twice a day, then it goes down significantly. Remember, we started at 1. The group that never uses any soy, men obviously here, the number of men who never eat soy versus the men who eat soy twice a day is 1/3 the risk. So when we deal with relative terms, that means there must be something in this food that seems to reduce prostate cancer. So now you understand the whole concept of relative risk and why we use it. The number of men in each group, we had over 10,000, almost 11,000 in this group, 900, 395, and 223, and you can almost guarantee these are probably the vegans. And when it says soy milk, they didn't say about other soy products, but that's the dominant soy product that you're getting. How about tomatoes? I love the health study because there probably isn't anywhere else that I can get research on tomatoes, okay? I don't know if I shared with you last time I was here, I got a British study on apples, comparing it with statin drugs. You just don't get this kind of research, but somehow the British government decided to compare giving people an apple a day or a statin drug. Who's going to get the best results? Guess what they found out? An apple a day was as good as their drug program. Here's the hard part. Guess what cost more? The apple. That also got my attention. It was more expensive to give you an apple a day than to give you a statin drug. So Americans, think of it. What do we pay for our statin drugs in this country? Well, $200 a month divided by 30 days, you're going to be coming with what, $6 a pill? $5, $6 a pill, whatever the prescription is. That's America. Socialized medicine, which I'm not a proponent of, but socialized medicine says what? We're Walmart. We're the big customer. If you want to deal with us, we will pay you 25 cents a pill because we know it only costs you 5 cents, so we don't know about your profits. So Pfizer, if you would like to sell us drugs to the country of England, a few million doses, maybe 25 million doses a day, then you will consider our offer. You realize how Walmart works, don't you? If you want to provide something for Walmart, they will tell you what your price should be if you'd like to do business with them. We in America, what do? We have this grand idea. It's called Part D of Medicare. We'll tax the whole United States so that we can pay our pharmaceutical companies their high price so that you can now have your statin drug. I'm going, this doesn't smell good. Politics has got a real problem. So what we've done in America, we haven't told the drug companies what to do. They've told us what to do, and now we have figured out a way so that they can get their money. Okay, how do you beat the whole system? Stay well. Don't use their drugs. Eat the apples. In America, apples are a lot cheaper. But can you believe that? It is cheaper to give their people a pill over there than to feed them apples. Okay, we're dealing with prostate and ovarian cancer. Eating tomatoes less than 1 per week, that was the relative risk they set. So as we increase tomato intake, if our relative risk goes up, then tomatoes would cause prostate and ovarian cancer. If relative risk goes down, then these tomatoes must have something in them that helps our immune system. So eating 1 to 4 a week, it dropped for prostate and dropped for ovarian. Eating greater than 5 or equal to per week, they dropped to 0.6 and 0.32. There's something in that tomato that decreases the risk of prostate and ovarian cancer. That's what we showed in Adventist population. Once again, when you see a slide like this without all the names of California, non-Adventist, Adventist, guess who this group is? This is the results from Adventist Health Study 2, that I'm pretty sure it's the 2 because I don't think we had this data on the first one. Adventist Health Study 2 among all Adventists. This is within the family here, folks. This isn't comparing outside the family and inside the family. That means that this data would only be significantly better if it was comparing out here within here. Fruit and cancer. We're looking at ovary, pancreas. Pancreas is a rough one. And we're seeing a much greater incidence of pancreatic cancer now. Before, you may know one person in your lifetime. Now some of you can name quite a few. It's amazing. It is the most deadly cancer, it is more deadly than lung cancer. The number of people out of 100 people with prostate cancer that are alive in 5 years is probably 2 or 3. We used to feel that lung cancer, well, it's not feel it was bad, it was bad. Lung cancer rate for 5-year survival was 5 out of 100. So pancreas is a more deadly cancer for humans. So let's look at this. When we can find something that would decrease the risk of pancreatic cancer, we need to listen up. Ovarian cancer, fruit, all types of fruit. If you eat less than or equal to 5 times a week, your relative risk is 1. Now here's a unique thing. If you eat 1 to 2 per day, fruits, your risk goes up. Hang in there with me. This is statistics. The group that ate 1 or 2 pieces of fruit a day, their risk went up 1.24. You say, no, wait a minute. So we look at the next group. They ate 2 or more fruits a day, and their risk dropped to a little bit over half. So the take-home message for you is, I don't know what unique group this is. I know it's part of the family here, but the group that ate fruit, only 1 fruit a day, must have been doing something else to make that happen, and I don't know what. The group who ate 2 or more a day, it dropped to what I would expect. Please, eating fruit is good for prevention of ovarian cancer. Pancreas, raisins, dates, and other dried fruit, we set them eating less than 1 per month, which means pretty much not even in your oatmeal, okay? I mean, you're just not eating dried fruit. And by the way, California is incredible for dried fruit. Dates grow in the wild out there, okay? And by the way, you don't have to dry dates. They come off the date palm and you can put them in your mouth. That's not technically not a dried fruit, even though it appears to be dry. They come right off the tree like that. And if you let them go too long, they get that sugar coming right out through the skin, and they kind of turn white. You've bought them by the box from a co-op, and you find them really sugary on the outside. It just comes oozing out. It's amazing that God made a date, but He also put that's one of the highest fiber foods too. But look at this. Dried fruit, for pancreatic cancer, it went from a relative risk of 1, that if you eat it at least 3 or more times a week, it dropped it to 1/5, 0.19. That's a 5-fold, a little more than a 5-fold decrease. That is awesome. Now, if anything, you would say, well, the pancreas produces insulin, and if I eat a lot of dried fruits, it may require more insulin. Well, obviously, that logic doesn't work out in this group. Once again, prostate and dried fruits, 1 is a relative risk, and if they ate them 1 to 4 times a week, they went up slightly like the ovarian, the ladies did here, but if you eat them greater than 5 times a week, you get great benefit. So a person that's concerned about their prostate should be eating their dried fruits in their oatmeal pretty much every morning. Lung, all fruits, the relative risk for lung cancer was set at 1. They're eating less than 3 a week, so they are eating some. But if you go from 3 to 7 per week of all fruit, you drop to 0.3, and if you eat more than 1 a day, so it'll be more than 7, 1/4 the risk. So the take-home message to your fruit intake is whether you're eating whole fruit, a variety of fruit, or dried fruits, if you will eat them on at least a daily basis, then you will gain all the advantage that we can possibly gain here. So that's a take-home message that they get. Now, we also know that our government says, have 5 a day. I realize that. These are talking at least that level or better. Meat seems to be one of the villains associated with coronary heart disease. We know that. Colon cancer, we got that. Bladder and ovarian cancer. Conclusion. The studies on Adventist in California suggest they are so conservative that it bothers me sometimes. They don't suggest, folks, this is the best data we have for cause and effect. They have passed the statistical test. They have passed the test of validity. We got more people alive at this point than we do at this point. Anyway, the Adventists in California suggest that a vegetarian lifestyle reduces the risk of many chronic diseases such as coronary heart disease, cancer, obesity, arthritis, diabetes. So what did we find out? The Adventist Health Study has a few firsts in what they've achieved. The Adventist Health Study was the first epidemiologic study to demonstrate that men who consume tomatoes and tomato products frequently, importantly, reduce the prostate cancer. It is lycopenes alone or the complexity of the food. So they're still asking questions. The answer is, I don't know. God didn't make lycopene pills, He made tomatoes. So there may be something else in that tomato. We know what lycopene does. We're thankful for it. But,
Just eat the tomato.
and I thought it was spelt with a Y, but I didn't make the slide, so we'll let that go too. But anyway. LYCO? Anyway. To each his own. The Adventist Health Study was the first study to demonstrate that eating nuts 5 or more times a week appears to significantly reduce the risk of definite fatal coronary heart disease and definite non-fatal myocardial infarction, heart attack, compared to eating nuts less than once a week. Similar findings are seen for eating whole wheat bread. Adventist Health Study was the first to demonstrate that intake of adequate amounts of water each day may significantly reduce the risk of fatal coronary heart disease. This observed protection in both males and females was independent of other established coronary heart risk factors. Those who consume a wide range of fruits, nuts, I don't say that here, vegetables, seeds, whole grains, and nuts have less disease than those who follow a typical American diet. Sounds almost like an Ellen White quote. The best diet for man, fruits, nuts, grains, and vegetables prepared in a simple way. Vegetarians appear to be at a lower risk than omnivores, meat as well as vegetable eaters, for several fatal chronic diseases: cancer of the colon, breast, prostate, cardiovascular disease, and diabetes. Vegetarians have a more favorable heart disease risk profiles: decreased blood pressure, there's your apple a day, decrease your cholesterol, decrease the prevalence of obesity. Cancer risk may be lower because of several factors: increased plant sterol and cholesterol ratio in the diet. Well, there is no cholesterol in a plant-based diet. This much, okay? So when you have an increase in plant sterols ratio in the diet, it's going to be a very high ratio because you don't have any of the cholesterol in the diet. Decreased primary and secondary bile salt ratio. When you change the amount of meat that a person eats, you change the secretions from the liver. The bile that comes from the liver actually affects the irritation or inflammation of the bowel wall. So when you eat a plant-based diet, you change what the liver does, and therefore you decrease inflammation in the bowel. Favorable dietary factors include more fiber and less fat. Lydia Newton, 112. She looks pretty good. Our oldest in the study was Lydia. 1,765 people aged 90 plus, 99 people over 100 years of age. Maybe you've seen pictures of that little old lady in Loma Linda riding around in her pink Cadillac, and I think she was over 100. I'm trying to remember her name anyway. This is Lydia. Here's Lydia and her daughter. How would you like to have a daughter that's 90 and sit around and have a conversation with your 90-year-old daughter? She's 112. Here's Marge at 101. She turned 105 on 2009. And you can obviously see that the slide presentation isn't current. And I don't know if she's still among the living or if she's waiting for Jesus. I don't know. The point is that Loma Linda, with all its smog, with all its pollution, which I wouldn't live there unless it was a requirement, and I did for 3 years. If anyone's going to have more lung cancer and more lung problems, I expect all these people who are living to 100. So now you can see why the smog study. How can I have people that have a higher percentage of people living to over 100 in a polluted environment? You can't say they had the best air to breathe. You know, they're not on top of the Himalayan mountains like those people with all their good food and the water that they drink and all the minerals in their diet and all everything we brag about. These people live in smoggy Southern California. By the way, you don't know there's mountains around Loma Linda until about November or December. And then you see San Gorgonio at 10,000 plus feet and you go, oh, we got a mountain. Or we get what we call a Santa Ana wind that comes off the Santa Ana desert, blows through Loma Linda, and pushes all the smog back where it came from, and that's called LA, Los Angeles, and they get a good dose of it for a while. And this has been going on. It wasn't just the automobile. This is a geographic. Loma Linda is in a big basin with mountains around us, basically. So you have basically a pollution area that you have this inversion concept and everything. So, in general, the health study documents that lifestyle makes a difference, obviously. The second thing it documents is down to specifics, whether it be nuts, whether it be water intake, whether it be tomatoes, whether it be red or white meat. It demonstrated that your white meat is actually worse for you as compared to better. It's also worse for you because the protein concentration in white meat is a lot higher than in red meat. And red meat has actually a lower percentage of protein than your fish. So if you want to mess up your kidneys quicker, then eat fish. Because see, fish have to work for a living. If they don't swim, they sink to the bottom and die. A cow can sit around and graze all day and doesn't have to work for a living or put in a feedlot and overfed, and et cetera, et cetera. So fish is always going to be a leaner animal because they got to outswim the guy that's going to eat them, you know. You see, humans are different. See, humans can afford to be overweight, but an animal in the wild can't because they get eaten. And so we have a privilege because hopefully you're not threatened by who's going to eat you next. So the point is that you have to choose to take care of yourself. I hope this gives you a little different perspective and maybe a little incentive that everything you've been taught, that the spirit of prophecy that you read can be validated in a scientific environment because it's true, because God said it, He keeps His promises, and He just wants us to do that. So if you're convinced from reading the testimonies, you don't need everything I just showed. If you want confirmation, then you can appreciate what we talked about. So hopefully it gave you a little bit of confirmation this morning. Any questions for me before we close this session?
Question on soy milk versus almond milk.
See, that's an excellent question. I can't stretch the data any further, but I can speculate that almond milk is going to have at least as good, if not better, results as far as all disease. But there's components in soy milk, the genistein, and there's other more powerful hormonal components in the soy product than there is in the almond. So I would expect to see some overlap that soy may be better for the prostate gland, almond may be better for the colon, for example, because it's more sensitive. So once again, I'm just doing some educated speculation, but that's all it is right now. Oh, it can't hurt, yeah. Almonds do what? You've got omega-3s in soy, but you probably have a higher percentage of omega-3 fats in the almonds, so that's worthwhile. Yeah, I would like more data, you know, because this kind of study gets closer to what I understand, but no one is going to come out and do a study just on almond milk. Maybe the almond growers might. And you look at what's happened. Look what's happened in the past 20 years in your store. How many of you could have bought almond milk 20 years ago? So you realize there's a group out there that's a lot bigger than us, as in Adventist, that are consuming these non-dairy products and these health-based products. Even convenience food, you can buy in certain places. My wife does. I'm not the shopper. She comes home with burritos, and she can get ones that are with potatoes and turmeric, well, that's a spice, but and all kinds of stuff. Totally vegan, wrapped up in a whole wheat shell. And so there actually is some healthy convenience food out there that's available for you or me if we don't want to cook that day. But I'm spoiled. My wife will make 20 or 30 burritos at a time, and they're in the freezer. And when she goes away to see the grandkid for a week, she says, I have all this food made. And she'll come home and say, did you eat anything? I'm going, well, then you know how much she made. I mean, how much can one guy eat in a week? You know, and then if we go to church potluck, like happened this last week, and everyone doesn't clean me out at church, then the first thing I have to work through, I got 5 days of trying to finish off this rice dish that she made, so I don't even get to my birthday. I mean, I'm not complaining. That's just a reality of life. So any other questions about this? The next presentation will be dealing with cancer prevention, which we've talked here about, and then this afternoon we'll deal with how you can treat cancer, not as in fever treatments, but as in dietary and lifestyle. And we've got a handout for you this afternoon that we'll be giving out at that time. We're not trying to hold it back, it's just it's appropriate for that particular thing, so you can take notes on that. Any other questions for me, and we'll have a prayer here, or whatever we need to do to close this session. So, okay, well, good. Father in heaven, thank you so much that that you have allowed scientific research to take place, and we know that true science will vindicate your name. And so I pray that your name will be vindicated for those people that are searching for truth. And we pray that whether it's with your word or whether it's with those people that are trying to serve you. And I pray that you'll bless each person for their part that they have played in this study. And we ask this in Jesus' name. Amen.